Hello everybody and welcome to Just Us 3 episode 8. This week we've got a really exciting episode because it is our second episode with a guest. So today we're joined by Holly Hostettler-Davies and today we'll be discussing feminism. How are you all?
Not bad,
thank you.
Good, thanks.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How's everybody finding lockdown?
Well, if my Wi-Fi behaves, experience. Yeah, it's all right. What about you?
Yes, good. It's nice to have a bit more routine now we're back at uni. It's gives us something to do, a bit more structure to our days, which is lovely. How are you finding things, Holly?
Yeah, all good. I was on half term this week, so I kind of had like a bit of a boring week because there was like no structure whatsoever. But tomorrow I'm back to like online lessons because I'm in sixth form, so doing my A levels. So hopefully it should be a bit more interesting this week.
And then hopefully we'll be back at school before you know it.
Yes, yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, have some structure back in our lives. I feel like that's what we all need at the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so if we jump straight into it. So obviously, as I said, we're discussing feminism today. And first of all, we wanted to start off with the myths about feminism. So one of the things I thought when we were discussing this episode is that a lot of people believe that feminism is radical and that feminists want women to be better than men rather than equal. And I just wanted to gain your opinion on this, guys. What do you think?
I think it's definitely a thing because I know a lot of guys that have kind of said over the years that as soon as I say, for example, I'm a feminist, they're like, oh my gosh, what? Because they assume it means that you want to be better than them, when really, if you know, the definition is equal rights for women. So I definitely think it's a thing. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think like there's the belief that feminism is the idea that we live in a patriarchy where men dominate and oppress women, and obviously that's true in some areas, but it's not necessarily true across the board. And so I think there's definitely like a stigma associated with it because there's probably not like enough education as well. And I also like, we're talking about feminism myths. The myth that feminists want to be better than men is one that I definitely disagree with, and that feminists hate men, because like feminism and diversity go hand in hand, and so it's unreasonable to suggest that we take a harsh position against all men.
Yeah, definitely. I know a girl when I was at school, and oh god, this is going back some years now. But she identified as a feminist, and I think at the time, this is probably when I was about 13, and not many people, especially young girls, were saying they were a feminist, and she kind of got attacked from the boys from it. So it's quite, I've seen it firsthand of people thinking that she saw herself as superior when in actual fact all she wanted was equal rights. So yeah, it is sad how it's got that stereotype, really.
Yeah, for sure.
And I definitely think the people that assume that all feminists are radical are the people who aren't educated on it. So they don't really know what it means to be a feminist and what feminism stands for, really.
Yeah, and
definitely.
I think that things like Twitter, you know, you see a lot of people like women wanting to be sort of vocal about feminism. And I think that, you know, you can look at that either one of two ways. And I think it does help to educate people on it. But I do think that those who aren't educated just see what they want to see and assume that it is just people wanting to be the better sex, really, which is a shame.
And especially with Twitter, I feel like although it's great for raising awareness, people are so quick to criticize if someone were to put their views on the internet. It can be quite a toxic place, social media.
Yeah, definitely.
Obviously, we've all had different experiences with feminism in our lives, and we briefly mentioned on the podcast, when was it, about 2 weeks ago now, about sex education and how we've all had different upbringings with that and how it's changed through school experiences and influenced how we've grown up. So how do you think the lack of sex education in schools affects women in general when growing up?
Well, I think this is like a really important topic to discuss, because for myself, I don't remember much about sex education in school at all. I just remember we had like the poster on the wall that showed the quote unquote normal menstrual cycle, and there was like no discussion of gynecological disorders such as PCOS and endometriosis. And I think that really affects women, because if we haven't taught them about these illnesses, how are they supposed to break down the stigma of them, and how are they supposed to realize what's normal and what's not? Because 1 in 10 people have endometriosis, yet there's a 7-year diagnostic time. I think that all comes down to the lack of education about it.
I was just going to say, I know somebody who's in the process of being diagnosed with endometriosis, and she's on the waiting list for an operation. And like you said, the amount of time it takes for them to be diagnosed and then to actually have the operation if they need it is ridiculous, because there are so many people who suffer with it, and especially with coronavirus at the moment, things like that are being put down the waiting list like further and further down. And it's just not fair, because a lot of people as well won't know that they've got it until a lot later on, because they haven't been educated about it at school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. What I was going to say is firsthand about endometriosis. My mum had it, and she's talked about how her periods with me, because we were quite open with each other, and how for her they were quite heavy periods. And I just don't think there's enough discussion on how painful it can be. It's such an awful thing to have, and especially as a young woman, you've been diagnosed with that. It can affect so many different things, fertility and everything. So it's definitely important that it's spoken about, really.
And someone that's been really good about it on social media and has really sort of educated people, I think, is Chrissy Teigen.
Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah.
I know that I think she suffers with it still, but yeah, she's been really good for sort of like very eye-opening about it. And personally, I didn't really know much about it until I started reading articles, and I think even that alone shows that there is a flaw in the sex education system.
Yeah, definitely. I hadn't heard of it until I went to the doctors, and they suggested that like it should be something I look into. But like, how was I supposed to know that? Like, I could never have gone to the doctors that time, and I would still be like thinking that it was normal when it's really not.
There are so many people who probably scared about being diagnosed with like a vaginal disorder, for example, because it can be scary to reach out for help, and a lot of people won't do it. So the fact that you took that step, like you said, if you hadn't have done that, you wouldn't have known. And I think going back to what Hannah was saying, the fact that like you've had to learn about certain disorders through a celebrity on social media, although that's amazing and it's great that she's raising awareness, we shouldn't have to learn through celebrities on the internet. We should be taught these things, and we shouldn't have to rely on social media all the time.
Yeah. It's quite sad, really, that we've got a generation looking up, like turning to Google almost to just research what's wrong with them in their sex education, when really it should have been taught properly on the school curriculum.
Yeah, that is literally the point of sex education, is to educate people about these kind of issues. And like another example is the pill. Like, I was taught that's just used for like contraception, but when I went on it for medical reasons, I had no idea about like how it would affect me in terms of like the side effects and things, because you're never taught about any of that either. And I think that's also really dangerous, because there's a stigma around these things because we're not brought up having these conversations.
Yeah. I remember when I learned about contraceptive, it wasn't till I got to college and I was about 16 at that point. So it's quite scary that like we've all had different school experiences, but me being 16 at the time and not learning about that, being legally allowed to have sex is quite disturbing, really.
It's scary.
It's a right as a young woman to know how my body and how everything works, and it's awful, really.
I think women need to be reassured that they're probably not going to find the right pill for them first time. Like my personal experience, I've been on the same pill for the past couple of years, and thankfully I've had such a good experience with that, and I've never had any issues, and I hope that none will arise. But for most women who I've spoken to, the pill that they first go on isn't the pill for them, and they have to go back to their doctors, be prescribed a new pill, or potentially have the implant or go on the coil. And I think we should be brought up knowing that it's not a problem with us, and that it's an issue with the contraception, that is what causes the issue.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, it's like is it PMS? I suffer with that. Well, I didn't initially, but now kind of as I've gotten older, I suffer with that really badly. There's probably like a week just before my period where I'm like just feeling really I'm not very a down person, but before then I will feel quite down, and just so many different feelings. And I don't think that's spoken about enough, how, you know, us as women, especially with your period, you don't have time off, you know, like you're still doing everything that a guy's doing. And I know there's with different sexes, there's always different issues, but you know, it is hard for women. You know, you're having to go through such change, especially with your emotions and everything, and it can impact your mental health and studying and everything.
I don't know about you, Olivia, but because I suffer with PMS too, pretty much before every period. Did you know what it was before you started having symptoms of it?
No.
Like, were you taught it in school? Because I think I literally Googled what I was feeling, and like, I didn't know why I was feeling so low before each period. And honestly, it was Google that taught me, not school. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think I must have been the same, truthfully. I don't really know. I think I just kind of read it on an article, and then I was like, oh, that's what that is. That's why I feel crap.
Yeah. And it's so common. It's really common.
Yeah, it's not spoken about enough, definitely. I think it needs to be spoken about more, and I just think everything, like I think we've spoken about it before, that guys need to be more in tune with that, because I know that guys at my school and all over, I don't think they know properly about periods or how to help a girl with the periods. If like it helped them in the future if they had a girlfriend who was on a period, like guys don't know how to handle that. You know what I mean? Like it should be an inclusive form of sex education as well.
Yeah, I in my experience in my school, we had like the one lesson that we had on periods, we were separated from the boys and they went like for their own lesson. And I think that's really wrong, because not only is that making sure they don't get the education that they need, it's also adding more of a stigma towards it and making like girls feel ashamed or embarrassed, and like also boys feel embarrassed to like ask and talk about it because they're taught that it's not something for them to like learn about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I definitely think segregation is something that needs to change, because most people who I've spoken to about their experience of sex education classes have said that without fail, the boys and girls were separated when it came to discussing things that affected just their gender. And that's definitely one of the main things that needs to change.
Yes, for sure.
It's like even sexual protection for people who, you know, who are LGBTQ plus, there's no one speaks about that, you know, for them as well, because you know it's hard because there's so many, you know, at that age you're trying to find out who you are and everything like that, and it would help, you know, everything, just to have everyone in inclusive conversation would really, really help with that.
Another thing I want to add is when it comes to periods, I know that the majority of people who I like hung around with at school had started their periods at a very young age, and I didn't start my period until I was around 14 or 15, which really is quite late. But I know the reason for that is because my mum also didn't start hers until she was slightly older. But they don't teach you that there's not a set age that you can start your period, and that obviously every person is an individual. We're not all going to be the same. But there was me thinking, oh my goodness, am I never going to come on my period, or is there something wrong with me? Like your mind goes in all different directions at such a young age because they just don't teach you.
Yeah, and then you just, then you start to worry about things that really, like, you shouldn't even worry about at that age. It is sad, because if this like schooling system taught you or taught us about that, then there'd be no worry. So it definitely highlights what needs to change.
Another thing I wanted to add was the fact that there's no mention of female masturbation and sex toys. And I can completely understand this, because obviously you don't want to encourage young kids to be doing this. But when you're thrown into secondary school life and you have no idea what's going on, and sex is made out to be something that isn't to be enjoyed and it's not pleasurable, like a lot of schools make it out as though it hurts, or like you should expect it to hurt. And that's just not ideal when you move up to secondary school and you still have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I trying to think back now when you mentioned that, and I don't think I was ever taught anything about that. And if I'm being honest, I don't think I know as much as I should about it now when I'm 18. And that's really bad. But if we're not like taught about it from a young age, then it just doesn't really cross your mind as much to educate yourself, because it's not really your place to do that. It's the job of sex education. It's like, why is it really male focused?
Yeah, it is. It's like wet dreams and everything for lads are always mentioned, but for girls it's kind of like, oh, you have periods and that's your sex education and that's it.
Yeah.
You can't learn how to masturbate, we can't tell you about sex toys, you just have this and that's all you're going to know. That's quite sad. It's not great.
Yeah, it is quite sad, because from the sex education system in school, I don't know if you guys got this impression, but I always felt like they were inferring that our only purpose was to produce children.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
they were kind of telling us like how not to, but not even to a very good very good level. So
yeah, and I also think there's like a gap where we weren't, in my school, we weren't told anything about like terminating a pregnancy or like what you do if you did get pregnant. It was more like, don't get pregnant, but there was nothing for the people who did get pregnant. Like there was nothing to like support them or like tell them that it's okay and show them their options. There was none of that.
I feel like it was more, they were told to go and visit the nurse once a week on a Tuesday sort of thing, because we had a school nurse in. But yeah, the teachers and the people who taught us a bit about the sex education never, yeah, you're right, they never really said about any of that, which is a vital part of, the information that is missing, really.
I think the whole point of sex education classes is to educate us, obviously, but all that it reinforces is it makes us feel as though we need a man. And that is just not the case. There are other ways around it, but of course we're never taught about them. And then, like you've said, Holly, we grow up and we don't know as much as we should, and we're left to our own devices to go and figure it out for ourselves, and it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, I think for me, the main place I've learned about my sex education is Cosmopolitan.
Yeah.
You read streams of articles that come on there are so like, quote, raunchy, but they're real and raw, and that's kind of what we need. We need a conversation that is raw, like that just says, this is right, these are sex toys, this is what it is, and even make it a bit fun. Yeah, it is a bit funny. People don't want to, sex is so intimate and it's such like a touchy topic that yeah, it is hard to speak about, but it can be fun to learn about. It's not something that should be taboo at all.
We touched on a lot of this stuff last week in our episode with Hannah Vanderpeer, who's an amazing sex and dating journalist. And for anyone who's listening, like, go and check out her work. She does some amazing things, like the topics she covers. We recently had a chat with her about her article about Zoella. And the fact they've removed her from obviously the curriculums in schools. And I think this is one of the worst decisions that the education system could have made, because yeah, we've missed out on sex education classes at a younger age, but the conversations that we have as young adults are more important. And I know that obviously Zoella was featured on the media curriculum that I studied at A level. And if I'd been able to discuss things like that openly with my classmates, that would have been amazing. And although obviously we couldn't at the time because she hadn't uploaded what she did about sex toys, I would have loved that. And the thought of me discussing the things that we've been discussing on today's podcast, if you'd have told me I'd have done that a year ago, I would have laughed in your face and said that I wouldn't have dared to have spoken about these things on the internet. And it's people like Zoella that are encouraging us to have these conversations.
Yeah, and even people like Hannah Vanderpeer, you know, writing articles. It just, you know, everyone, when they write an article about anything like that or sharing any piece of information like that, it does really, I don't know if they know how much of an impact they're having, but you know, it really does show that it's powerful what they're sharing, and it needs to be talked about more.
Yeah, because we're not going to break down these stigmas and this like embarrassment around these things if we don't have these discussions. And whilst it can be difficult to like start the discussion and actually open up about these things, someone's got to do it because there needs to be a change.
Yeah, definitely. It's like you know, the Me Too movement, when that came around, it that was such a pinnacle point, I believe, in, you know, the social media and the use of social media, but for a good way. And that was such an important movement, I think, for women, because it hadn't been done before. It was so important. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I actually the Britney Spears documentary like a couple of weeks ago, after that came out, I saw like the hashtag trending again on Twitter. And I just think it's really important because like when there's people in the spotlight speaking up about these kind of issues, other people are like finding the confidence to do the same. I think like social media is one of the best ways to promote feminism because it just encourages people to research and talk about it. It's like such a big community. You can reach so many different demographics of people. It can be like a hostile environment, but also it gets the word out there. And like you said with the Me Too movement, the change that has been brought because of that wouldn't have come if we didn't have social media.
Yeah, definitely. It's even like hashtags with that. It's like you know, body hair and stuff. Recently I've been doing some research for an article that I'm doing, and it was about like body hair. I think it was January or something. And it was all these women across January embracing body hair. And it's just so, like, not to sound over the top, but it's beautiful to see how the movement and everything is changing and how social media can be used for good, and it can promote feminism positively as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's just really encouraging as well to see other people talk about it, and it gives me confidence, and I'm sure it gives a lot of other people the same kind of feeling.
Well, one social media account that I think is really good for feminism is, do any of you follow Florence Gibbon?
I was just thinking, as soon as you said a social media account, I knew you were going to say Florence Gibbon.
Yeah, it's really good because even like she posts a lot of information about you know, things that go against the norm or the previous standards we have, so like growing out body hair and other things like that. And even she does these really cool illustrated quotes that I'm sure you've seen, and it's just very inspiring and empowering as well. I don't know if any of you have anything to add about her account or any other accounts you follow.
I'd just really recommend her book, Women Don't Owe You Pretty. I think it's an amazing book. There has been a lot of discourse on it on social media at the moment, but I definitely think it's a must read for people who want to get involved in feminism and want to learn more. And I think some of the chapters in the book like really make you come to a realization and make you realize that you shouldn't have accepted a lot of things that you have done in the past.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I got the book for Christmas and I'm like halfway through it, but I definitely think it's really important.
Yeah, totally agree. I think she's a great role model, and a lot of people interestingly have criticized her for saying that she's too radical and that she blames men for things, but I feel like from my perspective she promotes blaming men if they deserve to be blamed. I don't know if you both got that vibe from the book, or if Liv, if you've read it, but yeah, that was the vibe I got.
Yeah, it seems like she didn't do it without reason. So yeah, definitely, I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree too.
I was reading some, I don't know why I was reading reviews on it. I was reading reviews. I think I was thinking of buying it. And I know a lot of people, I don't know if you would agree, that they were saying something along the lines of like, it's a white middle class kind of book, you know, girl book, as it were, and she was targeting men, but I don't know, that's what I read a lot of. But that kind of leads me on to the next point of, do you believe that, you know, social media can also be used to tear people down? Like her book, you guys saying it's great, but then there's people who are ripping it apart and not seeing it for what it's actually trying to do, which is promote a message of, you know, feminism and equality, if that makes sense.
It's quite ironic, really, the fact that the book tries to promote building women up, and people have used it as venom to tear Florence Given down. And I think it's awful. And I think social media, although it can be a great place to build online friendships, I know a lot of the online friendships I've built have just been developed through like leaving a comment on people's posts, like complimenting them, and that can be the start of a really great friendship with a complete stranger. And I think that's such an amazing thing. But at the same time, one bad comment can be enough to tear someone down, and it'll stay with them for a very long time to come.
I was going to say one example of that is, have you watched that Jessie Nelson documentary? I think it's called Odd One Out. And I actually saw a clip today, and it was a one from, I think it was Good Morning Britain, and they posted a picture of the four of them trying to empower women, and they were, you know, going against the norms. They wrote, you might have seen it, they wrote messages on their body, and Piers Morgan, I think he says something like, you know, you're trying to empower women, so then you decide to go on naked. And it was just like he was ripping them down and or tearing them down. And you think, like, Florence Given and they're like Little Mix, they're trying to really sort of make a mark and, you know, evolve feminism and what it means to be a woman, but yet you know, people always find a way to tear them down. And it's just, yeah, it is mad, isn't it? And like you said, Katie, about the book, it is ironic that people use their own material to bring them down.
Yeah, I think social media is such a friendly and supportive community, and like on my own social media, women supporting women is everywhere. And like if people are tearing you down, then you're obviously like not in the right community. An example I can think of, kind of going back, I know you spoke about this with Hannah in your last episode, but journo Twitter, it can be a really hostile place. But back in May, I set up Empowered Journalism with a lot of other young women, and they are like the most lovely people I've ever met. And that's really shown me that social media can be empowering. You just have to find the right place.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, as someone, I'm a social media editor, so I love social I love social media. That it can be used for good. It can be used to, like, look at all of us. You know, the internet brought us together, and now we're having, I feel, a really meaningful conversation that will, someone right now who's listening, hi, you know, you're listening to this conversation, and it's just opening up for that person to have a conversation with someone else about feminism, and it kind of goes on to a ripple effect that it'll just start all these conversations, and what we hope that, you know, it'll inspire young girls to do the same, really.
We've touched on this in a previous episode, but we can't like emphasize enough the fact that you have the power to cultivate and change your social media platforms. If you don't like what somebody's posting, all you have to do is unfollow. Like, follow people who empower you and make you feel good about yourself. Like, that's all it takes, and it can really be a shift in mindset once you delete people who don't make you feel good about yourself. I also think it's a great thing nowadays. One of the recent updates on Instagram is the fact that you can't see how many times your post has been sent or shared with other people now. I know it's not the same for private accounts, but for like business and public accounts, you used to be able to see how many times it had been shared. And although I haven't experienced people directly tearing me down, I have seen that people have sent posts on my other accounts, and you do wonder whether that's them being positive about it or whether they're being negative. And although it's good that you aren't able to actually see this, like it still plants a seed in your mind that can make you feel negative about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just awful. I don't think, for me, you shouldn't be tearing people down. I think that's an insecurity in yourself, and that's a different issue. But I just think it's important to empower everyone. Like, what are you going to gain out of saying something like horrible? Like, what are you going to get? You know, like you to me, it just seems pointless. You should empower women, and everyone should empower each other. But I think this goes back to a bit of patriarchy, really, that women are expected, you know, it's kind of going back to suitors. If you've all watched Bridgerton, you're fighting over the guy and you want that suitor and you rip women down. And we've been taught that, and from history we've been taught that. And today it shouldn't be like that. Women should be empowering each other and realizing how just great they are, really.
Yeah, I think there's obviously still a long way to go with regards to like gender equality and the feminist movement, but I think as social media and the internet continue to grow, so will the movement itself, and I think it'll only get better from here on.
So I just wondered if any of you have experienced any targeted harassment as a result of your gender.
Yes.
I'd say so. Yeah, I think even from, well, the main thing I've noticed personally, I don't know about you guys, but it's more of how people speak to you. I feel like there's always been, especially in top subjects like PE in high school, it's kind of like they speak to you as if you're in reception, and they'll just be speaking to the boys as if they're mates, or even in class if people are misbehaving. I always found that they gave the girls a harder time and sent them out, whereas the boys, especially if it was a male teacher, they'd just have a laugh. But I remember this girl who I think I knew of, and she was at parents' evening, and I'm pretty sure one of the male teachers referred to her as an easy target because her skirt, she always had it quite high, but then the boys never ever got told off their uniform. So I find it's those things. It's not necessarily being verbally called out for your gender, but it's the subtle things I've noticed. But I don't know if you guys have experienced anything like that or what your experiences have been.
You saying that, Hannah, just reminded me of a time in sixth form. I was head girl at my sixth form, and obviously we had like a smart dress code, and there was one day that I chose to wear this skirt. It probably was shorter than it should have been, admittedly, but it wasn't to the point where it was like so short that I'd be called an easy target, for example. But I just remember walking into the sixth form area and all the teachers just stared at me. And like one of them made a comment and said about how short my skirt was, and I had to go home and change it. But then there were so many other girls who had been wearing like shorter skirts, but just because I had like a higher position and I had to like represent the school, it was like I was treated differently for that. And as well as that, with like dress codes at school, it shouldn't be a case of girls shouldn't wear revealing clothes. It should be the fact that boys shouldn't look. Boys should be taught that you should be looking at girls in that way and making them feel uncomfortable in settings like that, and in settings all the time. Like it shouldn't just be in schools, it should be everywhere.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm a big football fan, and so I've experienced a lot of like targeted harassment as a result of my gender. I've heard all of the like, you can't support football if you're a girl comments, and I've been told, had one person message me on Instagram and say that my job was to sit and look good instead of being passionate about my football team. But I think that's like only a really small minority, and it's only ever people on social media like hiding behind a screen. So I just feel a bit sorry that they're so insecure in themselves that they feel they have to revert to being sexist and targeting me because I'm a woman. I think it's more a reflection of them instead of me.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know about you guys, you probably all had it, but just being like having wolf whistled in the street, having some guy walk past you and say some comment about the way you look, and like I remember being in a club once and having guys say things to me and coming up to me and like trying to grope me and just all these horrible things, and you just think like it shouldn't happen just because I'm wearing, you know, my tight jeans and my little skirt or whatever, and I'm feeling great about myself. I shouldn't have some guy think that means it's an open passage for sex, because it's not a right for you to sexualize me in a way like that. Does that make sense? I'm doing it for my own empowerment, which it's so awful. It's like it goes back to, you know, the movement on Instagram where everyone was doing about I can't remember what it was, but you know, like with wearing no makeup and makeup kind of thing, and people saying, you know, I'm not wearing this for guys, it's for me. And often guys think it is for them, and it's not. It's about empowering yourself. So yeah, it's quite it's sad.
Yeah, I agree. And when you're talking about like sexist comments and stuff like out on the street, and I'm now realizing like how much it's normalized, and I think that's really sad. It shouldn't be normalized, but like just thinking back, I can think of examples where you just like kind of shrug it off, but it shouldn't be like that. We shouldn't be taught to like just shrug it off.
Before we move on, I collected a couple of statistics before the podcast, and they're absolutely harrowing statistics. 77% of women have experienced verbal sexual harassment, which is obviously more than 3 out of 4 women, and 51% had been sexually touched without their permission.
Oh gosh, that's horrible.
Yeah, absolutely awful statistics, so bad.
I know, it's that no, I can't even comment on that because I just think it's awful. I think that shouldn't be a thing, shouldn't even be. Yeah,
literally, that's how I felt when I first read them. I was literally speechless, because it's only until you actually quantify how many people that is that it makes you realise just how common and normalised it is. As you were saying, Holly, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think those statistics are obviously disgusting, but it does just go to show how important feminism is and how important these discussions are.
It's a question to put to you guys, but do you think guys can be feminists?
100%.
Oh, for sure.
Definitely, because again, like I mentioned at the very start of the podcast, I think, you know, people forget that the definition is equal rights for women. So I think, you know, well, I don't think there's an excuse for men not to be, really, but that's my own opinion. I don't know if that's shared with
I think
any of you.
I think they can probably feel just as ashamed as some girls do in admitting that they're a feminist because of the stigma that comes with it. But like, I just think it's so important that I think if more men followed the movement, then we'd see greater change, because the reality is that they're in higher positions where they can bring about the change. So it's really important that they're on board with it as well.
Yeah, I agree. If a guy said he was a feminist, I'd be really impressed, because I just think, not even impressed, I think it'd be normal. I think it should be such a normal thing. Guys shouldn't be afraid of it. You know, I'm not going to think any less of you. I'm going to think, great, like I'm speaking to someone who's educated and wants the same rights, wants equal pay, you know, wants everything the same as me. And why shouldn't that be a thing? Why shouldn't guys be a feminist? You know what I mean? So
I think it's because men know that their power will be threatened if they support the feminist movement. Powerful women intimidate men. There's no doubt about it, because they know that as soon as women are given the platform to do the jobs that they do, to do anything that they can do without having to worry about their gender, they know that if women are given a platform to do so, then it's over for them. Like, they know how powerful they are, and that's why they use it as an excuse to not support the feminist movement.
it's almost going back to like, you know, I don't know if you guys agree, but you know, if feminism is seen as fashionable now, because everyone seems to be calling them, like you could say everyone's been calling themselves a feminist. I don't know if you guys feel, do you think it's fashionable? Do you think it's turning into a trend, or do you think it should be adopted by everyone now?
Oh, well, I think it should be adopted by everyone, because going back on what we're saying about like men, it benefits men too, because men are criticized for showing too much emotion when they should be able to express their feelings freely without being judged. And so it shouldn't really be something that's considered trendy. It should be just normal, and perhaps people think it's fashionable because they don't understand the purpose of it, and them not understanding is not going to do anything to help us progress.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's a bit like the whole Black Lives Matter movement. I think if people educate themselves and understand what they're campaigning and understand what they can do to make a difference, I think then, you know, it's brilliant. I think you know, if you're not educated on it and if you don't do that extra bit of research, then I think it can become a bit, I know what you mean by saying fashionable. But yeah, I just think as long as, you know, people know what it means to be a feminist, then it's brilliant.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Do you believe that gender stereotypes are still relevant in today's society? And what do you think our society would look like without them?
I don't think we should have stereotypes. I think now more than ever people are embracing all genders. And I think it goes back to being a kid, isn't it? You know, like everyone's now, for instance, you know, not just giving a girl a Barbie and a boy a truck, you know, they're giving the choice of both. And I think that's really important because I just don't think gender stereotypes need to be a thing. I don't know if you guys feel the same, but I just think if we want equality, we should just remove it. You know, people can be whatever they want to be, truthfully.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I
And also
agree.
I think like we should recognize that we are different, but no one should ever be told that they can't do something because of their gender alone. Like we still have so many more boys and men in STEM subjects than we do girls, and that's like a really big stereotype. But if you think about going back to what you said about like society without stereotypes, I think that'd be a much happier world, because I feel like everybody would be able to chase their dreams and do what they want without feeling pressure for not sticking to like society's norm.
I think something that you don't have a choice over, or, you know, something that like you can't, I mean, you can change your gender, and I don't think that should ever act as a barrier. I
No,
don't think
definitely.
it shouldn't create divides in society.
I totally agree. And I think a lot of gender stereotypes interlink with sexuality in today's society. And as our ideas of sexuality have evolved, I think the need for stereotypes has continued to decrease. So like, depending on your sexuality, there are also stereotypes that you are meant to uphold, and they're a load of rubbish. They're an absolute load of rubbish. And it doesn't matter how somebody identifies. It doesn't mean they should act or look a certain way. Like we've all said, you should just let everyone be who the hell they want to be. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't make a difference if someone wants to dress a certain way. How does that impact our lives? Like, it has no effect on us whatsoever.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are like really selfish in the way that they view other people. Like they think that other people's choices affect them when really they don't. And so like we should all just like mind our own business really and just do what we want to do, because what someone else is doing doesn't matter. We should be happy if people feel comfortable to do what they want to do, and we shouldn't be like tearing people down.
I think a good place to end this episode will be to discuss about what our visions are of modern feminism. So what does it mean to you to be a feminist, and how do you see feminism in today's society?
I would like to see feminism. I think I just want to see everyone empowered, really, no matter what gender you are. I would love to see equality for all, and yeah, just the removal of the stigma of feminism and everyone just being happy.
I was just about to say that. I was on a similar sort of note. I was about to say I'd just like to see everyone happy, happy with who they are, and, you know, just happy in themselves. And again, I think empowered is the word that's definitely needed. But yeah,
Yeah.
what about you?
Yeah, I agree. I also think that the sexualization and like the objectification and like the constant critique of women's bodies should not be so normal. Like it's quite a normal recurrence in society, and I definitely think that shouldn't be. And I also think women should have the right to decide what happens to their own bodies, and I think modern feminism should also like take into account all genders and all sexualities, and maybe we shouldn't just focus on women becoming equal to men. We should focus on an equal society as a whole.
Yeah.
When I was thinking about this question, because obviously I found that question and I just sat there pondering on it for quite a while, and I came up with 3 words. I thought respect, acceptance and support were my 3 words to sum up what I wanted modern feminism to be like.
Yeah, I agree with
that. That's really powerful.
Yeah, I think it's just it's empowerment, really, isn't it? I think the key word of this episode is, like, the takeaway is just empower everyone you're around, really, and no matter your gender, just embrace that.
And you don't need anybody else to empower you. You can do that yourself.
Yes, definitely.
As Harry Styles says, treat people with kindness.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, well, it's been lovely speaking to you guys today, and despite, obviously, if you're listening to this, we will have edited out the technical issues, but despite the technical issues, it's been a really great episode, and I've enjoyed speaking with you guys.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on.
It's been such a pleasure, Holly, having you on. And of course, we'll leave Holly's social media links in the podcast description. She is also an aspiring journalist like us 3, so you should go and check out her work because it's amazing.
Thank you.
Anybody else would like to add?
No, thank you very much, Holly, for coming on. It's been lovely to meet you and lovely to have a chat.
Lovely. Yeah, lovely to meet you too. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah.
Yeah, take care, guys.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
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 Bye.